think the first thing is really awareness from the get-go. So when there is a decision to develop a medication, I think already there needs to be a plan on the ground as to how this will reach the furthest parts of the world. Because I think, trying to catch up once a commodity is shown to be successful and useful, then trying to walk that plan back and make the changes then, I think, is more difficult. So having a concept of something being a global good, something that really, it can save lives around the world, that needs to have a very specific plan from the get-go. And I think if companies have that mindset right from the beginning, I think, we can in a way work with them, recognizing, of course, that these are businesses, there are shareholders, and research and development costs money. So I think we're not asking that companies do this, entirely with philanthropy in mind, but there is a need to have a different approach when a particular product or medicine can be life-saving in across the world. But because of cost, or because it isn't, being regulated in a particular part of the world, it isn't getting there. So I think having that plan right from the beginning is absolutely key and critical. And then I think it is also working with these regions around the world. If there isn't a presence in those regions, it obviously, it's at arm's length. It becomes very difficult. So I think, again, working with those regions to know what the needs are, what the priorities are, where the gaps are, I think is really important. And another aspect that I think often isn't thought of is, again, where I live in Africa, medication often isn't, for example, tested in women who are pregnant or in women at all, and that often is the beneficiary the patient that I deal with is somebody who is pregnant. We often need to have these medications available to children, and so those populations are too often overlooked during the research and development planning. And this again is awareness about these regions and what the needs are of LMICs, low and middle income countries, where fertility is high, where children often are, the patients of the day. And so those kinds of awareness, and building those populations into the planning, I think is all part of, getting this right. The other difficulty we find in the populations of patients that I see in low and middle income countries, particularly in Africa, is that we have multi-morbidities, right? There are often a patient will have more than one infection at a time. For instance, they may live with HIV but also have tuberculosis. So again, we need access to medications that can serve a multitude of problems. And that isn't always in the planning from the get-go. So there's a thing called drug-drug interactions, for instance, which means we need greater access to a bigger variety of medication. And what often is our problem in low and middle income countries is constrained choice. There may be one or two antibiotics for a problem, or maybe even just one, with very constrained choices as to how we manage our patients. So it often means that we aren't able to provide, optimal care, despite the fact that we know these medications are available in other parts of the world. I'll be very precise. When it comes to treating somebody with HIV and TB, we often are constrained with what antibiotics we can use because of the drug-drug interactions with the anti-TB treatment. So these are the difficulties that we face, in parts of the world where we don't have access to these medications or they are simply unaffordable.